All right, so today we're going to be looking at something pretty wild.
Yeah.
The idea that quantum singularities, those crazy things from physics,
Right.
could be the missing link
Yeah.
to understanding how biology works.
Yeah.
And maybe even consciousness.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like this whole new world where these tiny structures are influencing these vast systems, shaping everything from our bodies to,
The mysteries of the mind.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a pretty deep dive today.
It is.
And the cool thing is we're not just talking about theory here.
Oh, no, not at all.
We've got actual scientific findings
Right.
that hint at these quantum singularity effects in action, which is kind of blowing my mind already.
I know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It suggests this whole deeper level of order and interconnectedness than we ever imagined before.
And we've got a whole bunch of sources to unpack today.
We do.
I mean, we've got experimental results from biologists,
Yes.
mind-bending theories from physicists, and even some philosophical explorations about what all this means for the nature of reality.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But it's going to be fun.
It is. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember right off the bat that some of this stuff is really out there.
Oh, absolutely. This is cutting edge.
It's on the frontier of scientific thought.
Yeah, we're like right at the edge.
But that's what makes it so exciting.
Exactly. We're asking these big questions about the universe and our place in it.
Exactly. So before we get too far, let's just break down this idea of quantum singularities.
Okay.
Because I think for a lot of people, that term just sounds intimidating.
Yeah, it can be a little bit.
So can you give us like the simplest explanation?
Yeah, so think of them as like fundamental interconnected structures that exist at the most basic level of reality. So they're influencing everything from energy and gravity to the very fabric of space-time.
Okay, so they're tiny, but they're powerful.
Extremely powerful. And what's really interesting is some scientists think that these quantum singularities could be influencing biological processes as well.
Okay, so how does something so tiny affect something as complex as a living organism?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge leap.
It is a huge leap, but think of it this way.
Okay.
One of our sources, physicist Dr. David Bohm, he proposed that these quantum singularities might be creating an underlying field that affects not only electromagnetism and gravity, but also the flow of energy in biological systems.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like this cosmic web where these singularities are like tiny hubs influencing the flow of information and energy.
Across the whole network.
Across the whole network, yeah.
So it's like a hidden blueprint almost.
Kind of.
That's shaping how life unfolds.
Right.
But how would that actually work in practice?
Right. So let's look at the work of Michael Levin.
Okay.
He's a biologist who's doing these really amazing experiments that are really turning heads in the field.
Okay.
He's shown that cells seem to hold memories and make decisions based on information beyond just their DNA.
So, like, they're smarter than we thought?
It seems that way, yeah.
Wow.
In one experiment, he was able to make flatworms grow heads at both ends of their bodies. Just by altering their bioelectric signals.
Wait, so you're telling me he just changed the electrical signals and they grew a whole new head?
Pretty much.
That's insane.
Yeah, and what's even crazier is when those flatworms were cut in half, each half regenerated into a two-headed worm.
So they remembered the change.
It's like they remembered a new blueprint.
Wow.
And it was guided by something beyond their individual DNA.
Okay, so that's where this quantum singularity framework comes in.
Right.
You're saying these bioelectric fields are being influenced?
Potentially, yeah.
By underlying quantum singularity networks.
It's a possibility.
But how could something so fundamental affect something as specific as bioelectricity?
Well, one idea is that this network of quantum singularities creates a kind of scaffolding for biological processes.
Okay.
And this scaffolding influences the flow of energy and information at a subatomic level, guiding how cells organize and communicate.
Within a larger organism.
Exactly.
So it's not that the quantum singularities are like directly controlling the cells.
Right.
It's more like they're setting up the condition for life to emerge and evolve in specific ways.
Yeah, like a guiding principle almost.
Okay, so how does all of this connect to the brain and consciousness?
Right.
I mean, we're still talking about flatworms here.
We are, but that's where it gets really interesting because if these quantum singularity networks can influence bioelectricity and cell behavior, imagine what they could do in the complex environment of the human brain. Some scientists believe these networks could be responsible for things like memory, cellular communication between neurons, and even the emergence of consciousness itself.
So you're saying the same forces that shape galaxies and stars might also be shaping our thoughts and feelings?
It's a big idea.
It's cute.
But there are pieces of the puzzle that seem to support it.
Okay, like what?
Well, remember the quantum brain hypothesis?
Oh, yeah.
Proposed by Hameroff and Penrose?
The one about quantum processes happening inside our brains?
That's the one.
Okay, yeah.
They suggest that quantum coherence in microtubules.
Now, what are those again?
Those are the tiny structures within neurons.
Okay.
And they think that this quantum coherence in those microtubules could allow for what's called non-local brain processing.
Okay, hold on a second.
Yeah.
What is not local processing?
Okay, so non-local processing is this idea that information isn't just processed locally within a single neuron, but that there's this kind of interconnectedness, this web-like communication happening across wider areas of the brain, and it can even happen instantaneously.
So instead of working on like one piece of a puzzle at a time, your brain is able to access information from multiple pieces simultaneously.
Exactly. It's like having a sudden insight or an aha moment.
Like a quantum leap in understanding.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And this non-local processing, according to Hameroff and Penrose, could be facilitated by quantum coherence within those microtubule structures.
So they're like tiny quantum computers.
You're arguing that.
In our brains.
Yeah, allowing for much faster and more complex information processing.
Okay, so we've got these quantum singularity networks potentially influencing bioelectricity, which could then be shaping how our brains process information.
Yeah.
But what about things like memory? Or the feeling of a unified consciousness? How do those fit into this framework?
That's where things get even more fascinating.
Do that.
And we'll explore that in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, just consider this. If these quantum singularity networks are as fundamental and interconnected as we think they might be, what implications could that have for how we understand the nature of reality itself?
Right, that's a pretty big cliffhanger.
It is.
But I'm definitely hooked. So we'll pick up this thread.
We will.
In the next part of our deep dive.
Absolutely.
Okay, my brain is like officially fried after that last section.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We're talking about quantum processes happening inside our brains.
It's wild.
Shaping our thoughts. And maybe even our consciousness. It's a lot to take in. But let's try to unpack this a bit more.
Okay.
You mentioned memory and consciousness.
Right.
How could quantum singularities possibly explain those?
Okay, well, let's start with memory.
Okay.
One of the big mysteries of neuroscience is how our brains store and retrieve information.
Right.
The traditional model focuses on neurons and synapses.
Yeah.
But some researchers believe it's far more complex than that.
Okay.
Like Dr. Karen Johnson, whose work we looked at.
Yeah.
She proposes that biophotons,
Biophotons?
that is tiny bursts of light emitted by cells, might play a key role.
So light in the brain.
Yeah.
I thought it was all about electrical signals. How would that even work?
It's a really fascinating idea.
Yeah.
Dr. Johnson suggests that these biophotons emitted by neurons could interact with water molecules in the brain to create a kind of quantum information field.
Okay, so instead of like our memories being files on a computer, they're more like holograms.
Kind of, yeah.
Patterns of light encoded in this quantum field.
That's the idea.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
So it could explain like why certain smells or sounds trigger vivid memories from our past.
Right.
It's not just that those sensory inputs are activating specific neurons.
Yeah.
They might be activating these entire patterns.
Exactly.
Within this quantum information field.
Bringing back like a whole cluster of associated experiences.
They're a whole story.
Yeah, like a whole network of interconnected memories.
Okay. But if this quantum field is where memories are stored, wouldn't that imply some sort of like universal memory bank?
That's a great question.
I mean, how would that even work?
Right.
And where would it be located?
Yeah, it gets to the heart of what makes this theory so challenging and so intriguing.
Yeah.
It suggests that memory might not be localized only within our individual brains, but that there could be this deeper level of interconnectedness, a shared field of information that we're all tapping into.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious metaphysical territory.
Yeah.
But let's try to stick with the science for a moment.
Okay.
Are there any experiments that could actually test this idea of a quantum memory field?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are a few promising avenues of research.
Okay.
For example, scientists are investigating whether biophoton emissions from the brain change during memory recall.
Okay.
They're also looking at whether stimulating specific brain regions with weak electromagnetic fields can trigger specific memories, essentially bypassing the usual neural pathways.
So like hacking into the quantum field.
Kinda?
Imagine being able to access lost memories.
It's a wild thought.
Or even implant new ones just by manipulating these fields.
It's like science fiction.
It really is.
But it also raises these ethical questions about memory and identity.
Right. If memories are stored in a shared quantum field, what does that mean for our sense of self?
Exactly.
Where does the individual end and the collective begin?
Big question.
Whoa, okay. But before we get too deep into that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to consciousness.
Okay.
We've talked about how quantum singularities might influence bioelectricity and memory. Right. But how does that translate into the subjective experience of being aware, of having a sense of self?
That's the million-dollar question.
I bet.
And honestly, we're still a long way from a definitive answer.
Okay.
But one intriguing idea is that consciousness might emerge from the complex interplay of these quantum processes happening in the brain.
Okay.
Remember those microtubules we talked about?
Yeah, the tiny quantum computers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some researchers believe they might be orchestrating the flow of information and energy in a way that gives rise to conscious awareness.
So it's like this quantum symphony happening inside our brain.
It's a good way to put it.
That creates the feeling of me.
Right.
Of being a conscious individual.
Yeah. Wow. And it's supported by research on brainwave synchronization.
How so?
Scientists have found that when people are engaged in certain tasks or experiencing certain emotions, their brainwave patterns become more coherent.
More synchronized.
More synchronized, exactly. And some argue that this increased coherence might be a signature of quantum processes at work.
Interesting.
Allowing for a more unified and integrated experience of consciousness.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces might fit together.
Yeah.
Quantum singularities influencing bioelectricity, biophotons, creating a quantum information field for memory.
Right.
And microtubules acting as quantum computers to orchestrate consciousness.
It's a lot.
It's a wild and complex picture.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly fascinating.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And it challenges us to think beyond those traditional materialistic models of the brain and the mind. If these quantum processes are really at play, it suggests that we might be more than just biological machines.
Okay.
We might be tapping into this deeper level of reality, a realm of interconnectedness and potential that we're only just beginning to understand.
But if our consciousness is truly influenced by these quantum processes, shouldn't we see more evidence of non-locality in everyday life?
It's a good point.
I mean, shouldn't we be experiencing those quantum leaps in thinking or feeling all the time?
Right.
Instead, it seems like our consciousness is pretty much confined to our individual brains.
That's one of the ongoing debates in this field.
Okay.
Some researchers believe that the quantum effects in the brain are too subtle or short-lived to have a noticeable impact on our daily experience.
Right.
Others argue that we might be experiencing these non-local effects all the time, but we simply haven't developed the tools or the awareness to recognize them.
So it's possible that our intuitions, those gut feelings or sudden insights that seem to come out of nowhere, might actually be glimpses
potentially
into this deeper quantum reality.
It's a possibility worth exploring.
Okay.
And some researchers are even investigating whether practices like meditation or mindfulness might enhance our ability to access these non-local states of consciousness.
Interesting.
They believe that by quieting the mind and reducing distractions, we might be able to tune in to these subtle quantum signals and experience a greater sense of interconnectedness.
So instead of our minds being like isolated islands, they might be more like interconnected nodes.
Exactly.
In a vast quantum network.
Yeah.
Constantly exchanging information and energy.
That's the idea.
That raises a whole bunch of questions about the nature of reality, the limits of our perception, and the potential for human consciousness.
Big questions.
Big questions. Yeah. But I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Right.
Let's dive into some of the specific experimental predictions that could help us test these theories and maybe shed more light on these profound mysteries.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So we've explored this mind-blowing idea that quantum singularities could be influencing everything, from our cells to our consciousness. We've talked about bioelectricity, biophotons, microtubules acting as quantum computers.
It's wild.
It's a lot to absorb.
It is.
But let's get practical for a moment. What kind of experiments could actually test these theories?
Well, there are some truly fascinating avenues being explored.
Okay, like what?
One area focuses on biophoton emissions from the brain.
Okay.
Researchers are looking for patterns in these emissions that correlate with specific mental states.
Okay.
Like memory recall or problem solving.
So like trying to decipher the language of light?
Kind of,
within the brain?
Exactly.
What else?
Another exciting area is the study of brainwave entrainment. Okay. This involves exposing the brain to specific frequencies of light or sound and observing how brainwave patterns respond. Researchers are finding that certain frequencies can induce highly coherent brain states.
Interesting.
Similar to those observed during deep meditation. The thinking is that if consciousness does arise from these coherent quantum processes, then inducing such states artificially could give us insights into how consciousness works.
That's incredible.
It is pretty amazing.
It's like we're trying to tune the brain to the right frequency to unlock these hidden quantum capabilities.
Yeah.
But these experiments all sound super complex.
Sure.
Are there like simpler ways to test these ideas?
Well, some researchers are looking at more everyday phenomena, like intuition. They're conducting experiments to see if people can unconsciously pick up on information that's not accessible through normal sensory channels.
Interesting.
For example, they might show participants a series of images, some of which are associated with emotional charged events, and measure their physiological responses. If people consistently react more strongly to the emotionally charged images, even without consciously knowing why, it could suggest a form of non-local perception.
Interesting.
Perhaps facilitated by these quantum networks.
So our gut feelings might actually be tapping into this deeper layer of reality.
It's possible.
But, you know, if these ideas are even remotely true, what does it mean for our everyday lives? Does understanding quantum singularities really change how we live and interact with the world?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's one thing to talk about these mind-blowing theories. But how do we actually integrate this knowledge into our experience? I think it starts with a shift in perspective, recognizing that we might be more than just our physical bodies, more than just isolated individuals.
So acknowledging that there might be this deeper level of connection.
Exactly.
This underlying web of quantum singularities that binds us all together. But does simply believing that change anything?
It can.
How so?
Think about the placebo effect. Simply believing that a treatment will work can have a real impact on our health. Similarly, if we start to view ourselves and the world around us through the lens of interconnectedness, it might subtly shift our behavior. We might be more empathetic, more compassionate, more in tune with the needs of others.
It's like that saying, what you believe you become.
Exactly.
But beyond individual changes, are there broader societal implications?
Absolutely. Like what? Imagine a world where our education system emphasized interconnectedness rather than competition, where our economic systems prioritized cooperation and sustainability over individual gain, where our political systems were based on dialogue and understanding rather than division and conflict.
It sounds idealistic.
It does.
But if we truly understood the implications of this quantum perspective, wouldn't those be natural outcomes?
I think so. But it's not about forcing any particular ideology or belief system. It's about cultivating a sense of curiosity, of open-mindedness, of willingness to explore new ways of understanding ourselves and the universe.
So this deep dive isn't just about mind-bending science. It's about expanding our awareness. challenging our assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately asking ourselves what it means to be human
Right.
in a universe that might be far more interconnected than we ever imagined.
Well said.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah, I think so too.
To our listeners,
Mm-hmm.
we encourage you to keep questioning, keep exploring,
Yes.
and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the universe.
Absolutely.
Who knows what incredible discoveries await us just beyond the horizon of our current understanding.
Until next time.
Keep those minds open and those questions flowing.
Absolutely.